Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for Coffee and Card at Home. So we are now on to week 3 using the Jar of Flowers bundle, which is the stamp set, which has all the different flowers. Today we're going to be using this one here, the kind of tulip one, and also it coordinates with the jar punch, so we're going to be using both of those this evening to create these cards. And the technique we're using today is watercolouring. So I'm just going to adjust my camera ever so slightly. Hi Tracy, glad you could join. So Tracy missed our session this morning, so she's watching on catch up this evening so that she can join in. So for anybody that doesn't know what Coffee and Card at Home is, each month I send out details about the stamp set and the punch that we'll be using, and then you have the option to choose whether to just purchase a kit, which is kind of the card, envelopes, maybe a few bits of ribbon or embellishments, that kind of thing, or you can choose to add on a stamp set, which in this case is the Jar of Flowers, as well as the kit, or add on a punch, or you could add on both things. And when you add on both things, you actually get your card, and everything that you need to make the cards is free. And then every Monday morning we meet on Zoom to go through the cards and make them together, and then anyone that isn't able to join, or for anyone else that's interested, can then catch up in the evening at 8:30. So that's what Tracy is doing today. So we're, like I say, week 3. We've got 2 more weeks left of this one, and then we will be changing to a bundle where we're going to be starting to make Christmas things, which is quite exciting. So September we'll be getting Christmas cards on the go. Right, so just going to pop those to the side. We're going to take our card base first of all. So this is a standard C6 base, which is half an A4 sheet that's cut in half at 14.8 centimetres and then scored at 10.5 centimetres. So we're just going to put that to the side. We don't need that just yet. And next we are going to take our bit of card that we're going to stamp onto. So this is Shimmery White card. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the light if I move it, but it has a very gentle shimmer to it. But this is great for watercolouring, so that's why I'm using it, because it can withstand the water a bit better than our basic white card can. So because we're watercolouring, we need to use Stazon for our stamping. So all of our stamping is going to be done using the Stazon ink. And the bits that I'm going to be stamping, I'm going to stamp the flowers, which I've decided to go with the tulips, but you could use any of the others. The stems for our flower and our jar. And then I'm using a sentiment from a different stamp set. So I will show you that when we get to that bit. So first of all, I'm just going to ink up my jar. I'm going to get that on down the bottom. And the only thing to remember with Stazon is, because it is a permanent ink, which obviously is why we need to use it for colouring, watercolouring, it does stain your stamps, so you need to use special Stazon cleaner. I'm going to do that afterwards when I've finished, but it's a good idea to do that, because otherwise it does discolour your stamps. Some people are not very keen on using photopolymer stamps with Stazon because of that reason, but I don't generally mind, because obviously it doesn't come off on anything else. But if you don't like your stamps to be stained, then it can do that, and I think over time it can just cause a little bit of damage, but I don't think I use them enough that it should be a problem. There we go, so we've stamped those bits. Just going to pop my ink away for a second. I'll come back and do my sentiment in a moment. So what we've got to do is we've got to do our colouring. So we're going to use an Aqua Painter I've got, or our newer ones called water pens. Either works well. If you don't have either of those, you could use just a standard paintbrush, a nice fine paintbrush with some water. And what we're going to do is we are going to use our ink pads, and we're going to squeeze the lid so that we get some ink in the top. So another way you can do it, if you don't like having all of that mess in the lid of your ink pad, it doesn't really bother me, is you can actually get an acrylic block and put it on your ink pad and then use the ink from there, but depends what you prefer. So I'm not really going to be squeezing my Aqua Painter very much, because if you squeeze it too much, it makes it very, very wet. But of course, depending on how much ink and how much water you use, it will be different as to how dark your ink comes out. So the thing with watercolouring is, and this is the same if you actually do it with painting, is that you can build up the colour once your base coat is dry. So sometimes you're better off going a bit paler, and then if you want it to be a bit darker, you can always come back and add some colour later on. But like I say, you just have to be a bit patient and you just have to wait for it to dry. So I'm just going in with very little water. It's kind of just about as much water that is coming out of my Aqua Painter. And then the thing to remember is to brush off the colour you've used before you change to another colour. So that's my stems painted for now. Then I'm just going to use Pool Party just to put a small amount of blue behind that, just so that it looks like we've got some water in the jar. But I want to keep it nice and pale. And I'm being quite fluid with this, and I don't mind too much if it blends a little bit in at the bottom. To keep it nice and watery looking. Remember to clean off your brush once you've finished with that one. So next we're going to start to colour in some of our flowers, and I'm using Highland Heather to give me some nice purple tulips. So again, being nice and light with the amount of water, but if you want a bit more ink, you can always go back and pick up a little bit more. And if you don't have inks or anything like that, and you've got watercolour pencils, you can achieve a similar look by colouring in with the watercolour pencils and then applying some water over the top. So it's another option. Or if you're not keen on watercolouring at all, you could just colour in the images with marker pens or blends or whatever you prefer. But I've just been trying to do a few different techniques over the weeks. Last week we did a lot with blends, so this week I thought we'd do something a little different and do watercolouring, which I don't think I've done any for quite a long time, so it's quite nice to do it for a change. So I'm trying to pick out all of the ones that look vaguely tulip-like. There's some slightly different shaped flowers here that I'm going to do, I think, in in a different colour. And of course you can choose your own colours, go with what you prefer. So I'm now going to go for my very dark blue that I've got, which is Misty Moonlight. And I'm going to use this really deep blue, as you can see from what's in the lid. I'm going to take some of that to colour in these kind of spiky flowers, because I thought they looked like they could be a bit like sort of delphiniums. So giving them a really nice deep blue colour. And also just remember that as it dries, it will dry a little bit lighter as well. I'll just try and get some more of that blue on there. There we go. I'll definitely make sure I wipe that off my Aqua Painter. And you might just need to bear in mind that if you've got a particularly wet area, the colour could bleed. I personally quite like that, because I think it does just show that you're definitely using Aqua Painters. But you might want to let certain areas just sort of dry off a little bit before you go to add some colour on a bit that could sort of already be a bit wet. So just kind of bear that in mind. So I'm just adding some pink now to a few of these flowers, which my pink I'm using is Flirty Flamingo. I've got all of those. And then I'm going to put some pale blue again, some of the Pool Party, on these little flowers that I left in the middle. Now you might be able to see that my stamp hasn't stamped perfectly, but what you can do is if you let your card dry out a little bit, you can actually take a black marker pen and just go over any of the sort of lines that the stamp may have missed. There we go. I think that's all of my bits coloured in there. So the final bit that I've got to do is my stems and leaves. So we're just going to get Old Olive, which is what I'm using, one of my favourite greens. One here for the stems and leaves. And some of the stems are so delicate, you're barely having to touch them with the ink actually. So if you find that you have any bits that you think, oh, that's a bit on the dark side, you can always squeeze out a little bit of water just to make it a bit lighter. There we go. I think I'm happy with that. Right, I'm just going to put that to one side for a second, just to let it dry before we start to do any cutting out, because that's the key thing. You want to make sure that's all dry. I've got a scrap of card here. I'm just going to cut it down a little bit so that I can then stamp on my sentiment. So because I don't have any sentiments in the jar of flowers, I have sentiments in Free as a Bird. There's some nice ones here. I've used thank you on my other two. I'm just thinking I might change to something different. So I might go with hello. So I'm just going to swap my sentiment over. And then I'm just going to use some black. Rather than using my Stazon for this, I'm just going to use Memento. And I think actually I might stamp it on the other side this time to where I did it before. So I'm going to go on that side and then I'm going to flag the end. So I'm just going to take my scissors, I'm going to cut it to about there, and then to flag our end we're just going to cut in the centre up probably about 1 centimetre, then from the corner to the top of that line and then from the other corner to the top of that line again. And that helps us to get a nice equally sized flag on the end. Then I'm just going to take my Highland Heather. I'm just going to tap it in the ink just to get a little bit of colour around the edge, just to help it to stand out against my grey background. Then we're going to put that to one side for a minute. I'm going to bring back my flowers. I'm hoping these are now dry. They're feeling a bit better anyway. So I'm going to take my jar punch first of all. I can get it undone. Bear with me. There we go. And I'm just going to pop that in. Line it up. Just squeeze the punch to grip it so you're happy with where it is, and then punch out. And then unfortunately we've got a bit of cutting out to do with this one. We've not got a punch or anything for the flowers, so I'm just going to have to hand cut this, so a little bit of fussy cutting. So we're just going to go a tiny bit away from the edge so that we get the same look that we would get if we were using a punch or some dies to cut out with. Just try to remember to turn your card and keep scissors still, and then that way you shouldn't get any jagged edges. I'm just going to get rid of that excess just because it makes it a little bit easier to work with. Just trying to be as careful as you can. This is why really you want to just give it a few minutes just to dry off, because you don't want to be catching any of your beautiful colouring in if it's still a bit damp. Mine feels like it just had enough chance to just dry whilst I did my sentiment. So let's get rid of that bit. Okay, so we're going to bring back our card base now. I'm just going to lay them on to start with so I can see where I want them to go. So I'm going to go with about there. That's going to sit just on there, and then my ribbon will go over the top to hide that join. So just to raise them up a little bit, I'll just use some dimensionals. I'm trying to be good and use up all my scraps at the minute, so that's one thing that you can do, is you can just cut these little bits around the edge and you can use those up. It's very rare that you ever need to throw anything away in card making, to be honest. Nobody's going to see this, so it doesn't matter what shape your dimensionals are. It saves a whole lot of bits going in the bin. I'm just going to peel those off. Just a bit more fiddly to get off, that's all. And then let's make sure my card opens the correct way. I'm going to stick that in the centre about there. And I'm going to put some more onto my flowers. And you want to sort of make sure you've got a few dimensionals so that your image doesn't sag down. I might just go with more in the middle. It's got a small one there. So that's one thing just to be aware of, is it's quite often that we go around the edges with our dimensionals and we sometimes forget the centre, and then when it's stuck down it sags in the middle. So just try and make sure that you remember to apply them so you've got them kind of evenly spaced across the back of your image. Then we're going to put that on so that it lines up with the stems, but like I say, that will all be hidden. Then we're going to grab our sentiment. I'm just going to stick that on with some Tombow glue, as we've got quite a lot of depth from the dimensionals we've just used. And I'm going to try and sneak that in just behind there. There we go. Then the last thing to do, actually no, I tell a lie, I'm going to do this before we do the bow actually, is I've just got a little bit of Smoky Slate ink, and I'm just going to take my Aqua Painter, not too much water, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a blend underneath there, just to make it look like my vase is actually sat on something rather than it's sort of looking like it's floating in mid-air really. And then the final thing to do is to take your ribbons. So this beautiful ribbon is Blackberry Bliss. I think this is actually sadly retired now, but it is gorgeous. Real lovely ribbon with this stripe running through it. So I'm just going to tie my bow. Obviously my bow needs some neatening up. So I'm just going to hold the knot and pull the ends just to even them up a little. You can sometimes sit fiddling with bows for ages, but I think I'm happy with that. And then just chop that end off. And then finally, just to stick that on with a glue dot. So that's just going to sit there, so that hides that awkward join that we've got. I'm just going to trim off this bit so it's a bit shorter to match the other side. And that's everything. So just bring back all 3 cards so you can see them. So they're all ever so slightly different because of the colouring and positions of the sentiments and various things. But I hope that's been a good suggestion for some nice relaxing watercolouring for you anyway. So just a quick recap of what we've used. We used Smoky Slate for our card base with a piece of Shimmery White for our stamping and watercolouring and for our sentiment. Inks we've used are Old Olive, Pool Party, Highland Heather, Misty Moonlight, Flirty Flamingo, and obviously Stazon Black ink and also Memento black ink. And then we've used an Aqua Painter or a water pen for our colouring in, and then to finish off the bow, which has been tied with Blackberry Bliss ribbon and stuck on with the glue dots. And then the adhesives we've used are Dimensionals and Tombow. And just a final reminder, the stamp set we've been using all this month is the jar of flowers and the coordinating jar punch that goes with it. So if you'd like to get hold of any of those, just drop me a message and I can help you out with sorting out an order for those. Next week we'll be on to our final week using this bundle, and we're going to do something quite out of the ordinary, something a bit different. So for the last 3 weeks we've stuck with the flower idea, but next week is not floral at all. So I hope you can come back and join me next week at 8:30 when you can see what my final idea is for the month before we move on to our new bundle. So thanks for joining me, Tracy, and thank you anyone else that's been able to watch or is watching on catch up, and I will see you all next week on Monday at 8:30. Take care, have a good week, bye.